our main topic this week here on Mastering Dungeons is world building through campaign building. So world building is a topic that comes up on our show often, but it also comes up in discourse around our show and among TTRPG designers and players and DMs. In some ways, it is the most basic and straightforward topic. Each time you run a game of D&D, you're presenting a world. Maybe it's already been created. Maybe you're creating it yourself. Maybe you're creating it on the fly. Maybe you're creating it with your players, interacting as you go. Maybe you're doing all of that simultaneously, with or without player involvement. And one of the reasons that we're covering this now is for our Patreon backers of the higher two tiers, we are providing content. And the last thing we provided was the beginning of an adventure, but really the beginning of a campaign. But when we try to break down and analyze the process for world building, it quickly turns into impossibility. The first thing that I tried to do when I taught this world building for stories and games class was have the students break up into small groups and come up with a plan or a process or even just categories for how you would build a world. We did this for 2 weeks. So for 4 classes, we got together and they did their work and we discussed, and then they went back and did it again. And what we got to, and what I knew we would get to, was that this was largely a fruitless endeavor. Everything that one group thought was perfect and logical in terms of a process of world building, another group discarded as illogical and not even important. Because there is no one way or process or strategy or user manual for building a world. So much will depend on the type of world, the medium that the world is used for, and so on. So that's where we're entering this discussion, Teos. Are you discouraged yet?
My interest is piqued, and also the lens that I'm kind of looking at this through, because I obviously didn't teach your class or see all this firsthand like you did. Is I was pondering, we reviewed Wild Beyond the Witchlight, right? And I was thinking about Spelljammer, which is, maybe chronologically next that we might review at some point. And I was also thinking about previous other campaigns and sort of, to what extent, how these books and products are approaching world building is really interesting. And sort of my favorite is kind of what Tomb of Annihilation does. Takes a discrete corner of the world that has a heavy theme flavor, Cholt, and tells you what you need to run it. So it's almost like a setting book. But you also have this adventure, and you have some character class features and stuff, or character background features and things like that, a little bit of player stuff, magic items, monsters. Like, I like that situation, and it's interesting when you go to something like Wild Beyond the Witchlight, a little bit different, the Fae theme, or Ravenloft. It's interesting to see the different approaches Wizards takes in their products, which mimics also how differently we do it as DMs, right? It's very interesting to see that.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you look at a game, and we'll talk more about this later, when you look at a setting built for a game, there are so many assumptions built into the game itself, into the mechanics, into the lore that support those mechanics, that these assumptions give you a foundation on which to start building. You already start knowing there are gods in this world, and these are the gods that I have to work with. There are cultures, is money, there are languages, there are all these things. And when you step outside of those rules and try to figure out, do we need these things? That's when everything starts to get murky.
Yeah.
Right. Do we need to know the gods of a world in which technology rules all? Maybe, maybe not, depending on how you are. What's your story?
Yeah.
Right? Are you building a video game, a novel, a television show, a role-playing game?
And if I think of something like Plangea, which it goes back into primeval, right? Like almost, caveman type days and the ideas of maybe dinosaurs and things like that, something like that. Then should your gods be totally different because we're further back in time? We're not, but those are questions you then want to think about. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to start with some sort of really high level basics about what lens to think about world building through.
Mm-hmm.
So in most of our creative endeavors, you're creating a world with words. You may use art,
Mm-hmm.
but even that art is going to be drawn from somebody putting words in front of the artist to draw it.
Yeah.
For the most part. So even if you're writing a story, even nonfiction set in our world, in our current time, each world is different to a different person. I can say, show me reality, and I'll ask a person in Alaska and a person in Hawaii, and their realities are going to be very different.
Love it.
So you need to, as well as you can, build the world each time you are presenting it to a game master, to a reader, to a player. So with that in mind, step one, details matter unless they don't.
Mm-hmm.
For every person who might be attracted to your world because you have named 37 different types of tea that are served in the capital city's most popular tea house, there's someone else who not only doesn't care, but when they see the word count given away for those 37 different types of tea, they are no longer interested in your product.
Yeah.
So finding that balance can be hard.
Yep.
With me so far?
I'm with you. And it's interesting because I've had that experience when you mentioned tea. Like, there was an encounter I wrote once for an adventure where I wanted to detail the tea house. And I went through a lot of iterations around how much space to put into it. I actually mimicked a tea ceremony with a 4th edition skill challenge. And I found that the play experience, that actual skill challenge, was the way to do it, rather than providing a lot of information, because of that reason that I thought people would just shut off, right? If you just try to explain to them things, that just gets in the way. Instead, have it be all play experience made a lot of sense.
Since you were in Italy, Umberto Eco wrote a book called Foucault's Pendulum.
Yeah, excellent.
And part of that book is like, as in the paperback version, there's like 2 whole pages of just naming fantastical creatures that are listed in a book. And it's you could read every name and it just was that important? I think for that it's important because they are setting a tone. They are a learned book. It's a learned vibe. So you want that. You might not want it for your game to present to players. Along those same lines, reality matters unless it doesn't. So verisimilitude can be a guiding factor when you design a world. Are the rules of physics, of geography, of sociology, of linguistics, are they followed in the world based on what we know of those from our world? If you break them, are they broken in ways that make the world more interesting? If you follow them, does following them make the world more vital and interesting to the audience that you are trying to serve? So you're speaking of dials, right? You're turning that dial and trying to find the right place for the form, for the audience that you're serving. Too often, the world building tips that I've seen in books, in blogs, are derived. They're reverse engineered from looking at Tolkien, from looking at Lucas, from looking at Roddenberry, from looking at current existing RPG settings and saying, well, they told this, so therefore this must be a step in the process. Rather than creating the process and then building the world from that. Yeah. When sometimes it just doesn't match.
Yeah. And also good luck doing all the work that Tolkien did, right? And even he would revise his novels over and over again, right? But yeah, do you want to build an actual language? That's up to you. I'll tell you my suggestion, don't. But both for this and the previous point about reality matters, like I think of a world like Eberron, right? And it's interesting how sometimes Eberron, even in products that are official, but also in people's campaigns, can be something that is just sort of like any other world. But when it really shines is when someone grasps how to communicate the Eberron of it, right? The lightning rail of it, the different societies, the big cities, those kinds of situations. And when you bring that out, or even things like we've seen in organized play, like the Western angle of it or the military angle of it, right? When you have that theme come across, that's where I think it feels very real to me, because you have done that work to carry forward those themes and give your players a real experience, right? If your players don't feel it, sort of like, why does it exist, right? Like, why did you say your world was magic technology, but then nobody witnesses it, right? It's the same old D&D rules. And then to me, that has lost its reality in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So let's talk about world building specifically now for tabletop role playing games. The rules of each role playing game are going to do some amount of world building on their own. What do the rules do for you automatically? So in D&D, the setting generally tells us that there are gods, because there is a set of player-facing classes that rely upon the gods or something larger, more esoteric than the players, providing them that power.
Yeah.
So how do you use that or change that for your world?
Yeah. And if I can jump in, I mean, one of the things about Dark Sun, right, that if Dark Sun is, say, the Season of Champions or some future thing that's going to come out, one of the giant questions a lot of us are curious about, that are long-term fans, is what are you doing with the divinity angle? Because with the divinity angle, if there are no gods in the world as it's supposed to be, but I can be a deity, same as always, does that matter or not, right? What does it do to the experience if that's no longer the case? And different editions have dealt with Dark Sun differently and how they lean into that or don't. And so it's very interesting, because it either creates and says something about the world or sort of doesn't, right? Like, which I think is part of 5th edition, that 5th edition has moved further and further away from a cleric gets their power from a god into cleric sort of gets their power. You can decide whether it's from a god or not, right? But the more that you lean on that, well, now it's not part of the world. And maybe that's a loss.
And the same thing is with warlocks now, right?
Yeah.
Warlocks are just another version of clerics. In fact, they might even be a more specific version of clerics in the sense that they are getting their power generally from a patron. Directly. And it's hard to have a concept as a patron as opposed to a nebulous light or a nebulous death or right. So that's another concept that's going to have to come into play.
Yeah.
So you can't separate world building from storytelling and game design when you are designing a world for a role-playing game. What elements of the world do the players need to interact with to understand their own character?
Yeah.
So they are creating a character based on this set of rules. Some are very codified, right? A fighter, you choose fighter as one of 13 if you count artificer classes, and that means a specific thing. A background can be a little more loosey-goosey, a little more story-driven, but still, if you are a hermit, that implies that you live far away from everything. What if the world that you're trying to build is all city, right? It's a metropolitan city world that covers the entire world. How can you be a hermit away from people in that case? How can you be someone that lives in wilderness when there is no wilderness? So even those are very world defining.
Yeah, and thinking about other RPGs, one of the things that can be hard is when you take something like Lord of the Rings, you mentioned Tolkien earlier, and you're playing a game like One Ring. And a thought that I always have is, okay, what am I doing to help my players understand that we're in this setting?
Mhm.
when actually a lot of it isn't known to us, right? I don't know what's going on in Mordor. I don't know the history of the elves. And, like if you think of, Frodo or Bilbo knowing very little about elves initially, right? Then
Right.
these are just elements of wonder that exist sort of separately. And what you know is your life as a hobbit, for example. And so
Mhm.
you want to figure out how that's going to change over time. But initially, the elements that you interact with are very much about your hobbit stuff if you're starting as a hobbit. And another example from the Free League world is if you're playing a game like Alien or Coriolis,
Mhm.
it's a gritty experience where things like gear can get expended and so on. So your equipment, which also gives you skill bonuses to your rolls,
Mhm.
adds extra dice, sort of things, that is inherent in the mechanics and therefore important in play. And so you want to think a lot about that gear, but also the story that gears tells is one of running out of old, of having the right job, that tool for the job.
Mhm.
And so that's very important as well, right? And you want to take that into account.
Yeah. And the final question I have here of what do the rules do is what elements of the world do the characters need to interact with or take part in to be within the story, the adventure, the narrative that moves
Mhm.
forward? So there's the question of what do they know from their past? What information, what about their character do they have that's past? But also, what do they need to know moving forward? Um, and again, a lot of the times we are reverse engineering this stuff. It's not a world we created, it's a world that we have been presented in book form or movie form or novel form or all of the above, comic form.
Mhm.
And we are trying to distill it and present it. We're not even talking about creating it at this
Right.
point.
Yeah, and even
Uh,
something like that I think about a lot is like Bastions in 2024 D&D.
mhm.
They don't do a lot to sort of say in the rules, "Hey, what is your campaign like?" But that's hugely important, right? If you want to open a
Right.
tavern, well, is there a guild in town? Is there
Yeah.
a noble you got to talk to? Like, how do you handle all these situations? Is a really interesting question that should be thought about setting wise before you ever go and present the rules of Bastions to your players, because you want to frame that up. I think Troll Skull Manor does a good job, as we talked
Mhm.
about, of sort of saying like, "Hey, here is what's going on. There are some guild people you need to interact with. There's a
Right.
competitor, right?" That then establishes the setting of it within a city like Waterdeep.
Yep. So this leads then to the question of how to build a world most effectively for your game, for your media, for your players, for your audience. And there are two ways to go about it that are not discrete in and of themselves, but they can give you a direction. The first is called top down or inside out world building.
Mhm.
Top down is you start with the world as a whole. You start with the universe. You start with these big,
That's the mhm.
big, huge lenses, big, huge concepts. You establish those and then you work your way smaller and smaller down in detail until you get to the point at which the characters interact with the world.
Right. So we could look at Dragonlance as a good example, where you think through what's going on with Tikhisis and what's going on with the story of the knights and all those sorts of
Mm.
things. And you're doing all that before you then decide what the characters will do, right?
Yeah. The the benefit of this is that it gives you wonderful lenses. And if you work very, very hard and spend lots and lots of time, it feels like a living, breathing world more than another way.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but the level of detail you need to remember is so complex that you usually end up getting things wrong anyway. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
So it's good if you have time and you have the energy and you have the creative juice to do that, and you have a very foolproof way of keeping track of all of this.
It
Uh,
anchors the world really well for sure, because you've done that
yeah.
thinking. It's also good if you're trying to tell a story that's significantly different from what the normal expectation, right? If this is just
Right.
another Greyhawk, another Forgotten Realms, then minor things during play will tell you everything you need to do, as a player to adjust. But if this is a world like Eberron, then understanding a little more like the wars that have taken place, all those things that really shape the setting, that becomes very important.
For sure. The second way is called bottom up or inside out world building. And that is, in my experience, the most important way to make a general audience, whether it's game master, if they're using your setting, or players, if they are interacting with your setting, feel connected to the world. And this is where you start with building from the kernel of what the characters are interacting with at the time. What does the tavern that they start look like? Who are those non-player characters who they're interacting with? I only need to know that to run this adventure right now. Then, as the players and their characters and the game masters experience more of this, of the adventure, more of the story, it builds further and further out. So it doesn't. I say it's probably more important to do bottom up than top down. It doesn't mean top down world building isn't important. Even though things may not be put in front of the players, it can still act as a focus, as we said. But there's always the risk from doing bottom up or inside out world building that you have to make a decision that comes up during play that you will get wrong later because you forgot that the temple that you decided that is in this town was to this god that did this thing. And now 12 sessions later, you're in a different town and there's a same temple, but everything's different. And you can always make up reasons for that,
right,
but you are still then getting into a loss of the integrity of the world, which may be important to certain game masters or certain players.
Yeah, and we talked about Tolkien, and you can look at, George R.R. Martin, right? And that idea of like, if you follow your characters along, you might find that you convoluted the story up with 3 different stories of mercenary groups, and your players no longer care about that. But you've never gotten to the point of what these all establish, and that becomes hard, right? Because you're just sort of following her to, like you said, with a temple. If we do a temple and we describe it a certain way based on whatever the player is interested in or whatever we think the town is, but then we realize, well, actually, that's not what the gods are about really in this world. This one's more of an exception. And I've spent all this time around the exception. And now I've got to go back and somehow tell them, no, the world's more like this, right? And Yeah.
And one of the reasons that we're covering this now is for our Patreon backers of the higher 2 tiers, we are providing content. And the last thing we provided was the beginning of an adventure, but really the beginning of a campaign called The First and Last Dungeons of Sirrangia. Or I made this name. I should be able to pronounce it. Sirrangia. So as I was concepting this idea, well, first we had been creating magic items. We had been creating monsters. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if we created those other rules as we built a campaign, as we built an adventure? And my vision was these characters, as they start this campaign, are on this tiny raft heading toward a completely new and uncharted island. We, as the players and as the audience, know nothing of their history. We know nothing of their backstory. The players know that there is not any help coming for them. They can't just run off to the nearest inn or the nearest temple to be healed. They are stuck. They are going to this island, and every person who has tried to go onto the island has not returned. I wanted to start from that concept, and from that build not just a campaign, but build a setting, build a world. And as the DM, I wanted our patrons to help me create the world through polls and through discussions on our forums and so on. I also wanted this to be a campaign where the players of each separate campaign could help build the world as they play. Not the world that they're about to explore necessarily, but the world that they're coming from. So if someone chose a dragonborn as their species for their character, I want them and the game master to be able to sit down and say, what does that mean? Is there a dragonborn nation on this home continent that people are from and everyone sees dragonborn as just dragonborn? Or are you a special case? Are you the results of a magical experiment? Are you a very, very rare species that once ruled this continent but has been almost demolished for whatever reason? Let's talk about that. Let's say where we want to come from. And see where the setting goes based on the game that's moving forward.
Yeah. And I liked that when you first presented this idea and shared the first draft with me of the first piece that we share with Patreon folks, I liked that it was very evocative around asking questions to me as a reader, right? I'd say, okay, you told me a little bit about these two nations that are warring. Suddenly this island appears in the middle. And we know we're going to a new sort of blank slate question mark area. But actually, I immediately started going, ooh, what are those two opposing worlds like? And they're presented a little bit like maybe bad and good, but there's a lot of latitude for that not to be crystal clear that way. So that becomes really neat. And one of the first things I said to you was, ooh, I want to go back and answer some of those questions. You said, yep, planning on it, which is great. And that's where this kind of inside out approach makes a lot of sense because it also mirrors the questions our players will have, right? So by approaching it this way, we're driving at the experience that we're going to paint and both the experience for our patron supporters who will get to detail some things and ponder things as we go, but also for the players themselves in their campaigns and our campaigns.
Yeah. And to get to this point where this sort of world building, this inside out, this only what's in front of you is known process means that you need to go back to the rules and you need to account for things, right? This world, this island, think like Australia, right? Not a tiny island, but a huge island. This island is unknown. It was not on any maps. Suddenly, the shipping folks saw it. It's like, oh boy, this isn't on any maps. What's going on? So, in a certain type of world, the first thing that would happen was they would go back to their rulers, their kings, their whoever, emperors, their presidents, and they would say, hey, there's this island. And the leader would say, okay, Archmage, use your wish spell and tell me what's on this, right? So in order to do that, we need to interact with the rules in a way that is interesting but not forced.
Yeah.
And so what we need to do is we need to say why. Why has this not happened? Why have the rulers of either the nation or the continent that the players are from, or the continent ruled by, I forgot, but I think I called her the Demon Queen amoeba or something. Why haven't they just gone in? Right. And there are different ways to do that. There may be the most powerful mages in the world only have third level spells. Even then, right? A locate object spell could break the entire game. So you need to figure out how can you limit it to keep those things from becoming the story rather than a part of the tools that the players have.
Yeah, because ideally you want that experience to be shaped by who you're working for, and is it under duress and you hate who employed you? Is it someone that you're looking forward to helping if you're going to meet someone from the other country who happens to maybe send their own expedition. Are you going to be happy with that? Are you going to be unhappy with, like, whatever, I'm glad to talk to them? Or are you like, oh, that's the enemy? I know because they, killed my auntie or whatever, right? Like you want to have that feeling of what that will be, which is cool, exciting. And I like that when we're looking at it as well, one of the things that we did early on is say, okay, here's the premise. And as you approach, here's the first danger you experience, right? You experience something and they're a new species, right? They're a new type of monster that you haven't seen before. So that immediately is more questions. And they have, tools, right? They have fashioned spears and things like that. They live underwater. They will retreat because they're intelligent. Even if they're not, they're not running cities from what we can tell in this first experience, but they have tools and they have communities and they will retreat when they realize they're not easy food. So that also creates questions about who they are, who else is out there like them. How do these people, what do they know? What do they interact with the other creatures that have languages? That becomes all very interesting.
Yeah. And I love this experiment because what you are asked tells you more about the people consuming the product than it does about what you've created, right? Because, Teos, your first question was, well, what's going on here, right? Yeah. Even though it has not necessarily much to do with the adventure that these characters are on, right? You want to know that. Other people are going to want to know, how do I learn new spells? Right? If I'm a wizard, how do I learn new spells if I'm stuck on this island? That's the most important thing.
That's funny.
Other people are going to just be looking forward to what's on the beach when they get there. And one of the questions, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we asked 2 questions and they're sort of different questions on purpose to try to get at different angles of what might tickle the curiosity of our supporters.
Yeah. So the first question is, what types of creatures should the characters encounter when they arrive at the beach? And we gave 4 possibles: humanoids, beasts, undead, or monstrosities. And I was surprised by the outcome.
Me too.
Only 1 vote for undead. Coming in first and a very close second were beasts at 10 votes and monstrosities with 9. And humanoids came in at 7. And so it made me wonder, what about beasts makes people want that? And monstrosities, there was a discussion then about what's the difference between a beast and a monstrosity, with a beast being a quote unquote natural creature, monstrosities being some sort of magically evolved creature.
What I saw in this, but there's always danger in that, but what I saw in this was folks being interested in, that humanoids, we want to meet some sentient creatures that we can interact with in sort of a cultural type way, but not yet, is kind of how I saw this result. Because what I'm really seeing here is this potential for sort of the primeval angle, the lost continent type thing. And so that involves jungles and curiosities and things that maybe I haven't seen before that my players would react to, right? As they go, oh my goodness, look at this horrid beast that lives here. And I think that's cool, right? I want to see the ecology of the place first before I go talking to somebody. And I think that makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay. For question 2, we had, for a level 1 adventure, what should the characters get the chance to attain level 2 after the next encounter, or should they have more encounters before leveling? So this first adventure, or the first encounter of this adventure, is the characters on a raft heading toward the island, and they're attacked by these humanoid fish people. So assuming they survive that, what's next? And so the response we got was, the choices were level after 1 more reasonably difficult encounter. So go from level 1 to level 2. Second choice was 2 encounters is not enough. They should have more encounters before leveling. And the third choice was something else. Tell us in the comments, or choose this to just see the results. Coming in at 55%, so just more than half, was after one more reasonably difficult encounter, the character should level. 31% was two encounters isn't enough. They should have more encounters before leveling. And then 14% were something in the comments.
Yeah. I thought that was really interesting because this gets to the pace of the campaign, right?
Yeah.
How quickly are you churning through this campaign in terms of your power level, in terms of telling the story of your characters? Not everyone's going to think about it in those ways. So I think, you're going to see varying poll results, but that's what, to me, this dictates, right? It's the pace of the campaign, how quickly the characters are advancing, and the type of story you're going to tell, because it's either a low level story or a high level story if you're very quickly advancing through things. So yeah, I thought that was cool. Being a third are saying, maybe a little bit more. That's not nothing. And then more than half are saying, it's okay to speed up here. And I could see that that's a reasonable place to stay to start with. And then maybe over time coming back in and checking in and saying, okay, how about now? Right? Now, do we want to slow it down? Do you want to continue to go pretty quickly on leveling? That becomes interesting too for the tenor of it, because of course, if you're exploring this unexplored island, this what you think is probably unexplored island, and if there's a lot of the sort of primeval stuff, then being lower level might be more conducive to that story. Not necessarily, but it can be. It might be more typical to do it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that goes back again to the world building question I had about how prevalent or powerful humans or humanoids or creatures or folks.
Yeah.
Are there archmages running around everywhere, or are you, as first level characters, some of the more powerful beings in the world? And that's another question that we could ask and see what sort of answers it elicits.
Love it. Yeah, well, I'm loving this. We're going to take these answers and we're going to work on the next step, and then we'll continue to have cool questions for everybody on the Patreon, and move from there. So that's very fun. I'm enjoying this a lot.
Yeah. So hang in there. And speaking of world building, I worked on a project for the last couple of years called Surviving Strangehollow. If you back that via Kickstarter, you'll be glad to know that it is making its long, slow journey from the printers in the Pacific area, and so you should be getting it within the next couple of months. If you only got a PDF version, or if you got the PDF version, you should already have it. If you did not get it during its funding period, you can get it now. If you want the digital copy via PDF, you can go to rpgtrader.com and search for the Strangehollow books. There's both, there's adventures, and then there's the setting book itself. If you are looking for it in print, you will be able to order it via Studio 2, and it should go out via other distributors and retailers. So the last time we talked about world building, I was thinking about it in terms of Surviving Strangehollow. So now I'm thinking about it in terms of this adventure that we're doing. So I want to give that shout out.
If I recall correctly, that was episode 179, which is amazing that it was that many episodes ago. Yeah. It doesn't feel like it was all that long ago, but it's fun. I always love talking about world building, and I'm sure we'll do a little more as part of this Patreon.
Absolutely. So thank you all out there for listening. And thank you to our supporters via our Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/masteringdnd and throw your support our way. Not only do you continue to help us keep the lights on here, keep us going, but you do get some of that content that we are releasing on let's say a slow but regular schedule as we have time.
Yeah, you help us do this. In fact, one of the things that also we're looking at is I'm going to try to replace my laptop, which then helps us do more shows when one of us is traveling and things like that. So yeah, there you go. It's a big difference.
We have 3 levels of support. We have Master of Dungeon supporters. You are very important to us, and we thank you. We have special shout outs to our Master of Realm supporters in our show notes. So if you have anything you're plugging, or you want to get your website up or whatever, just Master of Realms. I can see all of you here, and there are some absolutely wonderful contributors to our discussions on the Discord in that group. And we have Masters of the Multiverse. They are very special in that I get to butcher their names every week. And I'm going to start with Agile Monk of Fantasy Companion Workshops, Keith Eman of The Monsters Know What They're Doing, Lou Anders of Lazy Wolf Studios, Craig Bailey, Rudy Chainsaw Basso, David Bastiensen, Derek the Bearded GM, Steve Bissonette, Merrick Blackman, Bochjan from Duality Press, Calvin Bridges of Alos, Brobo Ballin, Kevin Criswell, Dead Inertia DM, Evil John, Evan at Nimbleco, Kevin Davis, Andy Edmonds at Nerdronomicon.com, James Fisher, Scott Fitzgerald Gray at Insane Angel Studios, Ted and Guyana of Frog Helmet Games, Ben Heisler and Paige Lightman, Simon the Hunter, Sean Hurst, Hyperlexic, the Jaunty Mantis TTRPG Podcast, Mark and Mary's Gaming Compound, The Mighty Jerd, Jordan of Season of War, JR of The Twilight Perspective, JT Evans, Brian King, Jim Klingler, Gail Kiermandy, Schwill from Maine, Leftria, Chad Lynch, Paul Mata, The Mathemagician, Jaron from Mathis Arcanum, Eric Mengi, Anna B. Meyer of Fantasy Cartography, Trey McLemore, Michael, John Mickey, Sean Molly, Dustin from Mountain and Myth Fantasy Maps, Falcon Neal, Tom Nelson, creator of the Deck of Player Safety, DT Norris of DT and Dragons, Phil Wirt from the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo, Philip and Lindsay, Frog Prince at Tentacle Squelching Wetly, Post Fiction RPG Audio, Ricardo Who Might Adventure, Robert Pasley, Vladimir Prunner from Croatia, Joe Rosso, Ozymandias Rex, Runner Rick, David Rideout, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Andy Shockney, Krishna Simos, Tim Smith, Spark from Dunner Games, Jeff Stevens at jeffstevensgames.com, Josh and Lee Wanika of the Tabletop Journeys podcast, Talos the Stormlord, Jeremy Talaman from Masters of Alchemy, Trace, Ryan Truk, Joe Tyler, thank you for lunch, Joe, Earthworm, Marcelo de Velasquez, the Valiant DM, Vidwocles G, James Walton, Graham Ward, Jason Ward from Accidental Cyclops Games, Javier Waziak, Waterford Wizard, Chris Webster, Ian Wright, and Z. Walt Winfrey. Thank you so much for your support. And again, you can go to patreon.com/masteringdnd. You can also help us out by leaving us a review wherever you listen to this podcast, or go to YouTube, which is youtube.com/@masteringdungeons, where you can like and subscribe and leave comments and do all of those things. So, Teos, what you been up to?
Not a whole lot because I was traveling, but I have a bunch. I did on the plane write a bunch of blog posts, so I think there's going to be some stuff going down at alphastream.org. Where can we find you, Shawn?
You can find me on the socials at Shawn Merwin or the podcast at Mastering D&D. So we are on our way to the Lost and Enchanted Island. We don't know where we've been and we don't know where we're going, but what are we going to do now?
Well, I'm already going to plan my if I'm playing a character in this campaign, I'm already going to be thinking about a merchant and how they're going to twist this all into a money-making scheme.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the one merchant who went to visit the island never returned. Mm-hmm. So maybe we'll find a zombified version of him, or worse, the horror.